We deserve stability and we deserve a permanent solution.
That was Ciriac Alvarez Valle, a DACA recipient back in November 2019, talking to ABC4 News shortly before the Supreme Court heard arguments on whether the DACA program should stay or go. 7 months later, the Supreme Court ruled that the Trump administration had illegally rescinded the DACA program. Welcome to our In Focus discussion tonight on President Biden's new immigration policies. During his first day in office, Biden signed a number of executive orders, one of which fortifies the DACA program. Joining us now live via Zoom is a person you saw at the top of the segment, Ciriac Alvarez Valle, who is a DACA recipient. Ciriac, it's great to catch up with you. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
For those who haven't heard your story, could you tell us about you and your family's background and the story of immigrating to the U.S.? How long have you been here, and what does Utah mean to you when you think of home?
Yeah, so I was born in Mexico, and my family immigrated here almost 20 years ago now because of a search for economic opportunities, and thankfully my family has been able to find that here in Utah. We've called home for the past 20 years here. Half of my family from Mexico immigrated here with us, and the other half is still in Mexico. So for me, Utah means it means more than home. It means family, it means opportunity, and it means hope.
And I think what some people may not realize is you've spent most of your life in Utah. So to assume that you could just go back somewhere else and that's home for you is really being misinformed. Now, you are a dreamer. Yeah. Could you tell us about what opportunities were afforded to you ever since you received DACA status?
Yeah. I came to the U.S. when I was 5 years old, and like you said, I've grown up here. I went to elementary, middle school, high school, and college here. So thanks to DACA, I was able to pay my way through college. I graduated from the University of Utah back in 2017, and because of DACA, I've been able to work legally and use my college degree, and now I work as a policy analyst at Voices for Utah Children.
Doing a lot of great things. Now, the last 4 years have been a lot of back and forth for the DACA and undocumented community with the Trump administration and the Supreme Court, federal judges. What kind of mental and emotional impact did that have on you as a DACA recipient?
It has been exhausting, to say the least. I think it's very difficult to plan a future, to plan a life, when the very program that allows me to work legally and keeps the fear of deportation in my life away is constantly being sued, or there's constant conversations that the program may end tomorrow, in a month, in 2 months. And so for me, the last 4 years have been very difficult because of that, but also because of the other hateful rhetoric, anti-immigrant policies that have added up the past 4 years.
President Biden signed a few executive orders already about immigration that will undo a number of Trump administration policies, and he's vowed to provide a pathway to citizenship for those such as DACA recipients like you. So what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think the very first thing it means is some freedom. For the past 20 years, I haven't been able to visit Mexico, and I haven't been able to see my grandpa in more than 10 years. And so it also means reunification for me, and of course, stability for my future, and being able to be recognized in the place that, like you said, Rosie, that I call home.
You did say earlier that you've graduated from the University of Utah and you're now a policy analyst. So tell us a little bit more about what you're doing now. I understand that you are giving back and serving those in the undocumented community.
Yeah, so at Voices for Utah Children, I work on a number of policy issues, including healthcare and immigrant rights. We also have been able to support funding for DACA recipients who are renewing or applying for the first time. And we work on a fund to help those families who have been left behind from federal aid throughout the pandemic.
As a segue to our upcoming next guest, tell us about the report that was recently released by Voices for Utah Children.
Yeah, so last summer we saw the inequality of federal aid that was given and saw that a number of families, mixed status and documented families, were left out from aid. And our economist and an intern counted up the number, and it turned out to be $154 million that families did not receive in stimulus checks and unemployment benefits because of their status. And because of that, we used it to advocate for a fund that would support families who have been left out essentially from any aid and any support throughout the pandemic.
And we're going to hear a little bit more about your guys' efforts with our next guest. All right, you've been hearing from Ciriac Alvarez Valle, who is a DACA recipient. Ciriac, it was great to catch up with you and see what you're doing now. Good luck to you on your journey to citizenship.
Thank you so much, Rosie.
It's safe to say that it's hit us all. It hasn't hit us all in the same way, right? We're all in rough waters, but we're not all in the same boat. And I think it's important that we realize that immigrants continue to be left out, but we need to fight to ensure that they're not.
That was Maria Montes with Comunidades Unidas back in August, talking to ABC4 News about a petition with thousands of signatures to Senators Mike Lee and Mitt Romney, asking for undocumented immigrants and families to be included in the financial assistance from the government during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thanks for staying with us for our second In Focus discussion tonight on President Biden's new immigration policies. In this segment, we'd like to discuss the 79,000 undocumented immigrants who were ineligible for federal pandemic aid. Joining us now live via Zoom is Estefania De Lucas, who is a screener for Voices for Utah Children, an organization who took matters into their own hands to help these undocumented and mixed status families. Estefania, thanks for being here tonight and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
In our last segment, Ciriac talked about a report released by Voices for Utah Children. Economists found that the state lost $154 million of aid that would have gone to mixed status families. What happened from there?
So Voices for Utah Children opened up an organization called Left Behind Workers Fund. This organization was able to give cash assistance of $1,000 to families in need who were affected by the pandemic and did not receive any employment benefits or did not receive the stimulus check.
Where has Voices for Children, for Utah Children, been getting the funding from for this program?
So the Salt Lake County did fund us as well as other private donors in the state.
And you are a screener for Voices for Utah Children. What criteria do you look for when reviewing applications from families requesting financial aid? How do you select the recipients?
So the biggest criteria we look for is to be able to help the community and the families who did get affected by the pandemic do not get help from the government, so that's the stimulus check, as well as are ineligible to receive any type of unemployment benefits.
And what are some of the ways that these recipients use their money?
So we have a lot of families who were able to use the money to pay rent, as well as medical bills, as well as we have a lot of families who their main home provider was the one that was affected by the COVID, so they are able to use it for home provision.
How many families have been helped in the first and second rounds of funding from this program?
So Voices was able to provide about $450,000, so that's 450 families. So 200 of those were in the Salt Lake County and 250 were around the state.
Now your organization is aiming for a third round of funding. Tell me about that.
So right now we do have a list of families that are still in need, and we are in need of more private donators. So we are in the process of advocating for more private funding in our GoFundMe page.
Estefania, I know that you work personally or at least directly with some of these applicants. Like, talk to me from the heart. I know you are looking for donors. The program is looking for donors. Let's put maybe to these applicants. Tell me a little bit about them. What has your experience been like working for them? In other words, like, why should the community care?
So, of course, $1,000 isn't a lot to many folks, but to these families, it was a huge impact. Like I said, obviously the pandemic was a huge, huge struggle for all of us, but everybody was affected differently. Some people did receive help from the government, some people did get the stimulus check, and some people did receive help from their employer. There's a lot of families out there who need the financial assistance. We have nonprofit organizations who provide us with a list of families that tell us the financial needs, and there's a lot of families out there who don't even have the money for their house utilities or bills or rent or medical bills. So it's really important to be able to keep funding and be able to provide some type of cash assistance to those families that don't have the other benefits. If you know of anybody who's willing to, donate or who is willing to need help, you can go ahead and find our GoFundMe page on our website for Voices of Utah Children.
Tell me about the emotional and mental toll that it can have on a family who already have so much to worry about, right? Whether they're undocumented or mixed status, they already have so much to worry about. Adding this financial burden or this financial toll, what is that like for them, at least like in your experience working with them? And what does it do for them once they're able to get assistance from a program like Voices for Utah Children?
So you did hear the gratitude in all of these families' voices, mostly if it was the main provider. So we had a lot of single mothers. We had a lot of parents who were able to provide for their kids, a lot of fathers who were left without employment and had no benefit, had no cash assistance coming through. So it was a huge benefit to them, mostly during the pandemic, having to provide for these families, having to provide for their kids. Most of these, like I said, single mothers that had kids under 5 years old. So there was a lot of happiness and gratefulness in their hearts. And to me, that was just the biggest impact, being able to hear these families, hear these parents, hear these mothers, these fathers out, having some type of help during a crisis where, the community, the undocumented community isn't looked at much, isn't helped much. So it's a great, great need for these people.
Now, Estefania, we already know that if our viewers at home want more information, they can head over to your website to be linked over to the GoFundMe. We have about 30 seconds left. Anything else that you would like to say? Any messages that you might have to viewers who are watching at home tonight?
So I just, encourage everybody who's able to donate or who knows somebody who wants to donate. I encourage you guys to go to the GoFundMe page. Like I said, we were all affected, but there's people and families who were affected and cannot get any assistance. So we should just look out for that community.
All right, you've been hearing from Estefania De Lucas, screener for Voices for Utah Children. Estefania, thanks for joining us on the show tonight and for your work in the community.
Thank you.
The biggest thing is that Congress needs to look at this issue and find something more permanent for the Dreamers so that they can have some permanent status.
That was Leonor Perretta, immigration attorney at Perretta Law Office, back in June, talking to ABC4 News after the Supreme Court ruled that the Trump administration illegally rescinded the DACA program. 6 months later, USCIS began accepting new applications and renewals for the DACA program. Welcome to our third and final In Focus discussion tonight on President Biden's new immigration policies. Joining us now live via Zoom to help us break down some of Biden's new executive orders is the person you saw at the beginning of the segment, Leonor Perretta, immigration attorney at Perretta Law Office and professor for the S.J. Quinney College of Law at the University of Utah. Leonor, thanks for being with us tonight. We appreciate your time.
And thank you for doing this segment.
I'd like to start our conversation talking about DACA. The past 4 years have been an emotional roller coaster for DACA. They've been going back and forth between the Trump administration, the Supreme Court, and federal judges. In President Biden's first few days in office, he signed executive orders related to DACA. So what does this mean now for our Dreamers and their hopes for a pathway to citizenship?
Well, President Biden specifically said that we should preserve and fortify DACA. We don't know exactly what that means, but it sounds like it will be a positive thing. It looks like President Biden is taking things carefully and easily and going through a thoughtful process in these executive orders. He isn't just ordering that something happen immediately. Instead, he's ordering the agencies that are involved in DACA, the Attorney General, the DHS, to review its policies and see what it can do with the goal in mind of preserving and fortifying DACA. So it's an exciting thing. You've heard from some Dreamers, and generally all the Dreamers that I've met have been doing great things with their lives and have been accomplishing a lot. It's a great program, and I would love to see it not only preserved and fortified, as President Biden says, but also turned into something more permanent.
Yesterday, Biden signed a second batch of executive orders related to immigration. One of those dealt with family separation at the southern border. Do we know approximately how many children have been separated from their parents during Trump's presidency, and what are the plans to address this problem?
I don't think we know 100%. The estimates are around 500 children that still remain separated from their parents after several years. The Trump administration is, or I'm sorry, the Biden administration is putting together a task force to address those issues and try to reunite those children with their parents, and also review why they were separated in the first place. This is something that we need to do. Obviously, it isn't. It hasn't really served the purpose that the Trump administration intended it to serve, which was to discourage people from coming to the U.S. The people who come to the U.S. are doing so because the conditions in their home countries are much worse than they are here, and they're willing to take a certain number of risks in order to do that. But we're hoping that these children can be united and that this will not happen again under this administration.
Now, the Remain in Mexico policy required that those seeking asylum to wait in bordering Mexico cities until the date of their hearings in U.S. Immigration Court. Approximately 70,000 people were enrolled since January 2019 under the Trump administration. What is President Biden planning on doing with this program?
Well, and that's been a terrible mess for those folks down there. Not only are they stranded in a country that is not theirs, where they do not have homes, and they're living in tents and terrible situations, being victimized by narco traffickers. And so I think the first thing that the Biden administration is doing is asking DHS to review that policy, review that program, and see if it should be terminated. And to start processing those people in a fair and efficient manner, increase the numbers of people that can be processed for asylum, stop turning people away, if possible, allow them to come in as long as it's safe, especially under COVID. So they're trying to, again, go through a thoughtful process to address these problems. It's a big problem, and it's a big number, and it hasn't dissuaded anyone from trying to come to the United States. So it's going to take some time. None of this is going to be done overnight, but they are addressing it, and they're also trying to address some of the root causes for why people are coming to the U.S. What can we do in these countries that they're fleeing from to prevent them from wanting to flee in the first place? So it's a very comprehensive look at the problem and how we can address it while still protecting the humanitarian aspects of asylum seekers.
Leonor, we have about 30 seconds left. I'd like to get this question in. Now, there's still a long road ahead for immigration reform. What would you like to see happen in the next 4 years under Biden's presidency?
Well, I think he's got a good proposal that he's sent to Congress already, and I hope that Congress will look at that seriously. I think a pathway to citizenship, starting with permanent residence for people like Dreamers and others who have been here long time and have, you know, paid taxes, worked, not violated the law. That's very important. We need to address the Dreamers. We need to address the people that are already here. And even more important, or as important, is we need to find a fair way to address the humanitarian issue of asylum seekers, especially the women and children who are escaping horrible domestic violence situations in their home countries.
You've been hearing from Leonor Perretta, immigration attorney at Perretta Law Office and professor for the S.J. Quinney College of Law at the University of Utah. Leonor, thank you for your expertise on this tonight. We really appreciate your insight.
Thank you, Rosie.